Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. In today's video, another installment of my 240 to Win series, we are going to be talking about the state of Hawaii, the political past and future of the state, and what it means for this year's elections. So far, we have looked at the 10 states that are safe for either party, 8 for the Republican Party and 2 for the Democratic Party in this year's elections, with no competitive races up and down the ballot to speak of in those states. And we have previewed Alabama, Mississippi, Utah, and North Dakota, the key races that are happening there. For Mississippi, it was the presidential race. For Alabama, it was a key House race happening there in the fall. And for Utah and North Dakota, it was the competitive Republican primaries for key races determining whether an establishment candidate won or a conservative candidate won in specific contests. And there were some mixed results in those two states this year, but some conservatives did win nomination to key offices in both states, so overall there were some positives. And you might be wondering, why is Hawaii not in the category of safe Democrat? Why are we talking about it as a state to watch for this election? And by a state to watch, I do not mean that it is going to be a toss-up state, anyone could win it. That would be a battleground state, and we will get to those states that are complete toss-ups for one or several races. This is rather a state to watch because I think it's going to be interesting to watch the margin at the presidential level. Yes, Hawaii is a very blue state overall. The state legislature leans extraordinarily Democrat. The Democrats control the state house by a whopping 45-6 margin, and Republicans only hold 2 seats in the state Senate compared to the Democrats' 23, and one of the 2 seats was a flip in the midterms, so Republicans only had 1 seat previously heading into 2022. When Hawaii became a state all the way back in the 50s, the first governor was Republican, but they only served 1 term and lost re-election. And it was almost 50 years before another Republican took that office, when Linda Lingle won in 2002 and won re-election in 2006, despite that year being a Democrat-favorable midterm. And since she left office at the end of her term in December of 2010, Republicans have had no foothold in the state to any significant degree. There has been no Republican senator from Hawaii since 1977, and there have been only 2 Republicans from Hawaii to serve in the United States House of Representatives in the entire history of the state. Hawaii elected a Republican to the House for the first time as a state in 1986, and then re-elected that representative in 1988. There was no Republican in Congress for the 20 years that followed, until the GOP surprisingly picked up a House seat in a 2010 special election to fill a vacancy. But that Republican who won the special election lost in the 2010 midterms when they were running for a full term. So outside of the late 80s, there has been no Republican since then, except for a few months in 2010. That's how Democrat Hawaii is. And the only times it voted Republican at the presidential level was for Richard Nixon in 1972, when he won every single state except for Massachusetts, and then again in 1984 when they voted for Reagan, who also won every single state except for one, that time being Minnesota, the one he lost. So it took historical landslides of a presidential candidate winning 49 of the 50 states for Hawaii to vote Republican. The state was not as Democrat in the early 2000s, with Bush losing the state by 18 to Gore in 2000 and losing it to John Kerry in 2004 by only 9 points, actually cracking 45% in Hawaii. But after that election, Hawaii became a dark shade of blue, the darkest actually, providing Democrats with their largest margin of victory of any state at the presidential level in 2008, 2012, and 2016. And that all started because of Barack Obama, who claimed the islands as his home state, winning by a whopping 45% and 43% in 2008 and 2012, respectively, cracking 70% of the vote both times. Absolutely insane margins there. And Hillary Clinton went on to win the state by 32, even though Trump was able to crack 30% this time and get her down to 62, with Barack Obama no longer headlining the Democrat ticket. And in 2020, even though Maryland and Massachusetts voted further to the left, voting for Joe Biden by a greater than 30-point margin, it still went for Biden by a 29-point margin over Donald Trump, although he did manage to crack 34% of the vote in the state. But even still, it voted 0.3% to the left of California in the 2020 election. Everyone on the right likes to point to California as the poster child of a deep blue liberal state, where all of the policies are very left-wing. And while that is true, it puts into perspective how Democrat Hawaii is, that it actually has voted to the left of California in recent presidential elections. So again, why are we talking about Hawaii if it's that Democrat? What possible relevance could it have at the presidential level this time around? Well, that answer is hidden in the details. If you didn't notice it, the last 4 presidential elections, even though it has gone by massive margins to the Democrats, each time it has gone by a smaller margin. The margin was 45 points for Obama in 2008, 43 points for Obama in 2012, 32 points for Hillary in 2016, and 29 points for Biden in 2020 most recently. Every single time the margin has dropped. Take 2020, for example. The state swung 3 points to the right from 2016 to 2020, even though the nation swung about 2.5 points to the left as a whole, which means that it trended to the right, and in fact, all of the handful of states that trended to the right in 2020, it shifted and trended the most to the right, which is actually pretty notable and not statistically insignificant. So therefore, it will be interesting to see how the state trends from 2020 to this year's election in 2024. Because if the state keeps trending and shifting the way that it has been, you could see Trump get in the high 30s and possibly even crack 40%, which is something that Republicans have not done since Bush in the early 2000s. And that would be an interesting development for the political future of the state. I don't think it will be a Republican state anytime soon, but if you see a Democrat state shifting to the right, that's still overall a very big positive. And especially a lot of circumstances could lead to Trump doing a lot better and improving further on his performance from 2020. And again, there are several reasons for that. The chief among being the wildfires that ravaged Hawaii last year in 2023. And Joe Biden, the Biden-Harris administration, was very, very slow to respond, very, very slow to provide relief to the citizens afflicted by the fires. Their handling of the crisis was very incompetent and really just came across as a very bad optical look for the administration. Hundreds were tragically killed in the wildfires. And Joe Biden literally said no comment to questions from reporters about this incident while relaxing on a beach in Delaware. And again, was very slow to actually address publicly the crisis, and the relief was not as fast in coming to Hawaii as one would possibly think it should. So Joe Biden and the Biden-Harris administration is not the most popular in Hawaii. When Biden dropped out of the race, his approval was at an all-time low in the state. He was barely above water in Hawaii, no pun intended, and that's saying something. So the fact that his approval rating was barely at 50% in a very liberal state is really telling and not that good for him. As a result, Biden had a very poor performance in the Hawaii Democratic caucuses this year, only getting 66% as the incumbent, and the only primary contest that he lost as the incumbent, which is very rare. Incumbent presidents do not normally lose primaries or caucuses. That's very embarrassing for the incumbent to lose. It might have only been the trivial caucus of American Samoa that he lost, but it was the first contest that an incumbent president lost in the renomination process since Jimmy Carter. And we know how things ended for him, and things have ended similarly for Biden since his re-election prospects were so bad that he was forced out and dropped out of the race. And I mention American Samoa because they have similar demographics to an island state such as Hawaii. Not to mention that in polling, even after Biden has dropped out and now Harris is the presumptive nominee, Trump has overall improved with minorities in polling, and Hawaii is a minority-majority state. And it also has a fairly large working-class population, which is a demographic and economic bracket that Trump historically performs well with in electoral returns. So combining Biden and his administration's downturn in popularity in the state of Hawaii following their handling or mishandling of the wildfires in the state, resulting in poor primary performances, and the demographics of Hawaii being made up of groups that Trump is either improving in or has potential, given past results, to do well in, and the fact that the state has been trending right for the last 2 to 3 election cycles, it is not outside of the realm of possibility, even with Harris as the nominee, that Trump could continue the cycle of improvement in the state for Republicans and set his sights on improving all the way up to 40% of the vote. It's quite possible. And also, the former U.S. representative from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, who literally ran against Trump in the Democratic primary for president in 2020 and destroyed Kamala Harris on the debate stage, is now on Trump's side 4 years later. She has left the Democratic Party, she has left Congress, and she is openly supporting Trump. And Tulsi does have some popularity in Hawaii. And she is out there spreading Trump's message and stumping for him. Not stumping for him in the way of she's barnstorming the state and the islands of Hawaii to win it for him. It's not going to be won by Trump. It's too Democrat. But there are a lot of factors on Trump's side and against the Biden-Harris administration that is running for re-election under the banner of Kamala Harris that could see the Hawaiian Islands have a rightward shift once again, and perhaps even more drastically this time, in response to a lot of political winds shifting that way ever since the wildfires struck the shores of Hawaii. This is obviously not the most consequential result in the presidential election, far from it, but rather it is a state to watch because it will be interesting to watch, in fact, what the margin of victory is for Kamala Harris. She will indeed win it. I'm not saying Trump will flip the state. That would be silly, but rather it will be interesting for the future to see how Trump improves in the state, assuming that he does actually improve, to see if Republicans have any chance in the future, short-term or long-term, at making some gains in bringing Hawaii back from the brink. Only time will tell, but I think this will be a less consequential result to keep in the back of your mind on election night to, out of curiosity, pay attention to and see what the results are when they come in. If we as conservative Republicans really want to take this country back, we have to take a 50-state approach and not prioritize all of them equally, of course, because these swing states to win key elections, such as the presidency, obviously take importance. But we, the voters, have to take responsibility in our own states, whether we live in a red state or a blue state, to push the governments that govern our home to the right in a more conservative direction. And that starts even in a state like Hawaii. And given the factors I discussed in this video, I think that there is a real possibility, even if it is just a nudge in that direction, that we see some actual movement, which would be a really interesting development. Thank you for watching this latest installment of my 240 to Win series. The next part will be coming very soon, where I will cover yet another state to watch in the upcoming election.